back to History Class with Dr. W. As we prepare to embark on our discussion of the years 1920 to 45, we need to spend some time talking about some of the factors in the country leading into that decade, some events that already occurred before 1920. The most important by far is World War I, which casts a long shadow over the entire period that we're going to be studying in this course. So we need to spend some time talking about World War I and its legacies. In this first lecture, we're going to talk about the man who was president during World War I and his impact on the early 20s, Woodrow Wilson. The president who guided us through World War I and into the early 20s was Woodrow Wilson, a Democrat elected president in 1912. I'm going to give you a little bit of his personal background, not to overwhelm you with details about his life, but to shed some light on some factors that influenced his role both during the war and the legacies of the war into the 1920s. Wilson was born in Virginia in 1856. He was the son of a Presbyterian minister, a religious and powerful intellectual man. As a Virginian, he was, of course, from the South. He actually remembered the Civil War, which occurred when he was a young boy. He recalled standing on a rooftop in Atlanta as Sherman's troops rolled through. He was the only president to that point who understood what it meant to lose a war, having witnessed the defeat during the Civil War. And he took those memories of the Civil War with him later in life and, of course, into his presidency in the White House. Most notably, this made him very cautious about entering a war, and his delay in involving the United States in the early stages of World War I is relatively well known. Wilson graduated from Princeton in 1879, UVA Law School in 1880, and completed graduate work in political science, history, and economics at Johns Hopkins. He got his PhD in 1886. He taught history for several years, which gives all of us historians hope for our own futures, and then eventually served as the president of Princeton University from 1902 to 1910. So what does this tell us about Wilson? Well, certainly he was an academic. He was extremely intelligent and well-spoken. During his time as president, he was thoughtful, calculating, and very convincing. Throughout his academic career, he was intensely interested in the problems of democracy. He believed that power lay with the Congress for most of his life, and then found himself deeply inspired and moved by Theodore Roosevelt, the president just after the turn of the century. Roosevelt developed what was known as the bully pulpit, in which the president became the center of attention. Inspired by Roosevelt, Wilson came to believe that a president with the full backing of the American people could be an unstoppable force. Wilson won the presidency in 1912, and during his presidency he developed a close relationship with the press. He always wanted to remain in touch with the people. As an educator, he was constantly educating the public about his policies and decisions. He was always giving speeches and writing papers. He was extremely well versed in the workings of democracy and was skilled at getting things done as president. He also enjoyed a majority in Congress for the first 6 years of his presidency, until his lame duck final 2 years. So let's summarize some of these aspects of Wilson's personal life. After his upbringing in the South and witnessing the defeat of the South in the Civil War, he was very cautious about joining a war and participating in a war. He was very well-spoken and convincing, and at the same time very concerned with the will of the people. And we're going to be talking about some of this a little bit more, but as president, he always wanted to make sure that the will of the people was behind him. He also was an Anglophile, meaning that he loved England. He traveled there frequently as a young man and spent several summers there. So in the early stages of World War I, while the United States was theoretically neutral, Wilson always supported England. It is also not completely outside the bounds of our course to note Wilson's unfortunate legacy of racism. While not a focus of this chapter, we'll be discussing the Red Scare and the intense racism of the 1920s in future lectures. Wilson's racism has drawn increasing scrutiny in recent months, as Americans everywhere reconsider the lives and careers of many figures who have traditionally been celebrated. And certainly, the national discussion over statues and monuments has drawn great attention to these kind of debates. There have been campaigns to remove Wilson's name from buildings at his beloved Princeton University, and the Woodrow Wilson Cold War Center is going to be changing its name. While Wilson was raised in the Jim Crow South and inherited his racist leanings from his parents and those in his childhood community of Augusta, Georgia, he maintained a staunchly racist perspective even as President of the United States while living in the White House. As much as he could, he enforced segregation in federal organizations and he supported segregated bathrooms. When a delegation of black leaders met with Wilson in the Oval Office in November 1914 to discuss these and other matters, Wilson cut short the meeting and the leaders left bitterly disappointed. We will return to this topic in more depth in future lectures, but for now, suffice it to say that Wilson did nothing to ease the growing racial tension in the country during his time as president. The causes and early stages of the war are really beyond the scope of this course. We're trying to lay some groundwork in order to get to the beginning of our course in 1920. But suffice it to say that the United States joined the conflict reluctantly in April 1917, shortly after Wilson began his second term as president. And as this 1916 campaign truck shows you, he was campaigning largely on staying out of the war as he campaigned for re-election in 1916. Of course, shortly after winning re-election, the United States did join the war. Following that, Wilson drove the nation to mobilize for a war that he had campaigned against joining for several years. And this became one of the legacies of his presidency, and it's going to require quite a bit more discussion. And in fact, in the next lecture, we're going to talk more about America's mobilization for World War I, and particularly the ideological war on the home front.